welcome everybody to this CANIE Accord session for universities and colleges. Thank you very much for taking the time to be with us here today. During this session that will be initially 90 minutes, we'll be covering the CANIE Accord, and also we'll be having a good panel conversation with our three panelists today. But before that, a little bit of housekeeping. Chat it up. If you can, please leave your name, not your name, your institution name and where you're connecting from. And we're also recording this session in case you want to share it later with a colleague or you want to review any information. It will be available on the CANIE YouTube account. So without further ado, we're going to go to the agenda today. Before, of course, introducing what we have here today, which is a session with Mark from North Island College, Kilian from Louisiana State University, and Alejandra from LCI Veritas University in Costa Rica. So we're going to go with them in a couple of minutes. Before that, just a very brief introduction. I see some familiar faces, which is nice, but I see also some very unfamiliar faces. So that's mainly this session, that's mainly this part. We're going to be covering a little bit about CANIE today, about the CANIE Accord, and also we're going to be having a panel discussion. So first, about CANIE. CANIE is a grassroots organization. There we go. I'm not sure what's wrong with my mouse. But before moving into that, I want to recognize our CANIE colleagues here today. One of them, our chapter vice president, Rafaela, is here with us today. I am Sebastian Fernandez, the current president of the Americas chapter. And we also have here Zach, our volunteer for the CANIE Accord within the Americas chapter. And just by coincidence, we also have Kilian, our chapter secretary, who today is presenting as a panelist on behalf of her institution. So basically, CANIE is practitioners. We're a grassroots organization made 100% out of volunteer practitioners from different institutions, different actors in the international education sector. It was born in the beginning, in late 2019, the beginning of 2020. So it's a relatively young organization with the clear goal of moving our industry forward in terms of climate action, with the goal of advocating in terms of climate action, and with the clear vision to make our sector towards net zero by the end of this decade. So that's the main role of CANIE. Again, one of the big things that CANIE does is foster events and bring people together. That's why it's a network. And right now we count with almost 1,000 members. It's free to become a member. So if you want to become a CANIE member, you can do so by going into the CANIE website, registering, and that basically makes you a CANIE member. And we also have some working groups and different chapters that can contribute to this, to organizing events like this and other things that CANIE does with the sole objective of advocating for climate action within our industry. So what brings us together here, is of course the climate emergency. Everybody here, I would understand that you understand clearly that we're going through a climate emergency. 2023 has been the hottest year ever recorded, with September being I think the fourth month in a row with being the hottest month ever. So there's no question there's a climate emergency that will have very deep impact within within everything that we do in our world, from food production to the way that we normally live our lives. And what we understand is, as today exactly, we're beginning the Conference of the Parties in the United Arab Emirates, where world leaders are concentrating into tackling climate change from their side. We are doing the same from our side within international education, understanding that, of course, our value as an industry is great. One of the greatest things that I like about being about working within international education is the fact that we really are an industry that generates a great impact on the world. We impact students, those students impact their communities, that's the power of international education. It's really unmatched to any other industry. So within our sector, we understand that, of course, we are doing a lot of good, but at the same time, we are also contributing to the climate crisis, fostering a lot of trouble and a lot of impact within our sector. So that's what we want to help here with CANIE. We want to advocate for action, not just words. We want to advocate for action within the International Education Network. And what we're doing today is, of course, learn from 3 very good cases that are implementing action within their institutions. And last but not least, one of the objectives of CANIE, of course, is to network, and that's what we're here for. Many of you in the US will understand the Giving Tuesday, which actually it's Thursday. CANIE is 100% volunteer run. We survive as an organization on donations and sponsorships for the events that CANIE organizes. So that's one way that you can also contribute with the organization in order to keep the lights on while we are advocating for climate action. Before moving into that, Zach, Rafael, I'm not sure if you want to add anything. Oh, I love to see Ainsley here, our current president. Welcome, Ainsley. Actually, before moving into the Accord, as you're here, if you want to say just a few words.
Good morning, good evening, everybody. I am delighted that I put my camera on and Sebastian noticed. So pleased to be here. The work of the Accord Accelerator Group has a special place in my heart. I think this is one way in which CANIE can really drive rapid change by engaging not just individuals who work in international education, but also our institutions. I am, like Sebastian, a passionate supporter of international education. I think that the work we do genuinely changes lives, but it's also climate impactful. So how we, as people who work in international education, can acknowledge that climate impact and see what we can do to make a difference in our work is very important. And I think the CANIE Accord is an excellent way in which we can both take action and also advocate for our institutions to do so. Thank you, Sebastian.
Thank you, Ainsley. Great to have you here. So the CANIE Accord, it's relatively new. Actually, by this time, 2 years ago, we were meeting on in line with the COP26. Now we're on COP28. We were having what we call the Leaders Forum, and the Leaders Forum was the main initial event that created the CANIE Accord, that where after a lot of work, the CANIE Accord was possible. So in this event, where I had the privilege to be invited, we invited leaders all across the sector within different continents, and basically they gathered in order to see how, as a sector, we can fight the climate emergency. So after this Leaders Forum, there was that concentrated 73 contributors and 5 impact areas. We decided on the CANIE Accord, okay, this is what we want for the sector, and this is what we produced out of that event. But the most important part of these was the 70 commitments that the CANIE Accord has The 70 commitments are ways in which your office, your institution can contribute to fight climate change within your specific role. We have 3 guiding principles within the CANIE Accord, and so far we have 53 signatories up to today. One of the CANIE Accord, even though it started to be created 2 years ago, it was only released in April 2021, so it's about a year and a half old. And during that time, we had a lot of signatories and many other who are considering to sign it. We understand that in many institutions, these processes can take a lot of time and approvals and so on. So there's many around the pipeline that will become signatories soon that started this process within the last year. Also, the CANIE Accord comes with another document that is the Glasgow, what we call the Glasgow paper. Glasgow because COP26 was held in Glasgow, and it's very, very nice document that you can read and digest on how you can contribute from your sector, from your office, from your institution into climate action. So both the CANIE Accord is more a technical accord, and the Glasgow paper is how you can implement that in a few pages, of course, with some extra work from your side, but it gives a great guide. The 3 main principles of the CANIE Accord is, number 1, take immediate action, and here I highlight the immediate action. I usually don't like the wording of climate change, even though everybody understands that. I prefer to use the climate emergency. It's really an emergency. And when you have an emergency at home, you take action. You just don't say, oh, I'm going to sit down in my couch and just wait for the emergency to pass. No, it will not pass. You just need to act on the emergency. And that's the main principle of the CANIE Accord, take action. Number 2, to collaborate, innovate, and educate within our sector, and that's what we want here, and that's what we are doing here, educating about the climate emergency and collaborating for that. And also, what the Accord, as the education sector, as the international education sector, we need to acknowledge that unfortunately, the climate emergency has been generated mostly by countries that now are more will be less impacted in terms of the consequences of the climate crisis. So it's very important to include the climate justice concept into everything that we do, and making sure that the sector considers climate justice as a very important point of the climate emergency. So signing the CANIE Accord is basically a very boring process, but it's very straightforward. You will need some time. Just go to the CANIE website, fill in a form where you will need to decide which are your 70 principles that you would like to commit to. And after that, you will be receiving some materials in order for you to share your commitment towards the CANIE Accord. So you will receive a toolkit with some images, some content for you to share and to communicate about the CANIE Accord. Our main person here, I will introduce him in a second, but Zach is the right person you want to speak within CANIE within the Americas. If you want to sign the CANIE Accord, if you want more information, he's also available for a short meeting in order to explain you more in detail information about the CANIE Accord. So these information, once you sign the CANIE Accord, you will be included as a signatory within the CANIE website, and of course you will be able to have this link and share it with your materials within your LinkedIn profiles, your whatever, how you want to share that climate action is relevant for you and that you have signed the CANIE Accord. Very important. we have so far, some of these are the signatories that we have received. Very important within the Americas, we have NAFSA, who signed the CANIE Accord during this year, and it was announced at the last NAFSA conference. We also have, for you, if there's any Canadians here, CBIE is also a signatory, and also AIEA within the Americas, and also the European NAFSA, the EAIE is also a signatory, as well as API. So during the initial steps, we concentrated into getting these organizations and consortiums and associations of universities into signing the accord. And now we're concentrating more into reaching you, universities, colleges, in order for you to affect change and also impact the sector, because we know that you are also leaders in this. Many in other institutions, you have colleagues, etc. So we want the whole sector to really consider climate action and sign the accord, and sign the accord or not, but take action, ideally signing the accord. So before we move on, and yeah, I've taken 20 minutes, so I don't want to make it too long. If you want to activate your cameras and be part of the group photo, we're going to be sharing this later on social media. If you don't, then that's fine. And we're going to take a couple of group photos. One else. Okay. Perfect. Oh, let me just stop the sharing for a second so we can get that on record. Great. Perfect. Thank you very much. Now we move into, oh my God, here. Share. Can you see my screen again?
It's dark.
Okay. Rare. Okay, give me a second. Not sure what I did. What happened? Okay. Just a second. Not sure what I did. Screen share. Okay. Now, yes. Okay, so now I'm going to stop. Number one, introduce our three panelists today. So first, thank you very much, Mark, Kilian, and Alejandra for being here. We wanted to give you some diversity for this event and offer very different profiles of universities or colleges into this event, so you can understand how the CANIE Accord is possible to implement within any institution that deals with international students. So we have Mark from North Island College. North Island College is a community college based out of Vancouver Island in British Columbia, Canada, with about 2,500 students, of which 600 are international, and very important as well, 600 Indigenous students. And with some comprehensive programs within the scope, from arts, science, and digital design, very health programs, etc. So a good variety. Then we have Alejandra from LCI Veritas University in Costa Rica, San Jose, the capital of Costa Rica, with about 2,000 students, of which many students as well, many international students that go to Costa Rica on study abroad programs and so on. It's a university formally offering both masters and undergrad, but focused in the arts and design area, especially design, architecture, and some programs as well on management, on business management, and finance. And last but not least, we have Kilian out of the LS of Louisiana State University. But here, a main difference in the case of Louisiana State University, it was not the whole university signing the CANIE Accord, it was the international office signing the CANIE Accord. That is totally possible for you to do, to sign if you have the capacity. Of course, if the whole university can sign, that would be better, but you can also sign the CANIE Accord on behalf of your office. Louisiana State University, huge university with almost 40,000 students and 1,500 international, and with programs on basically anything you may want, as we described it. So for the initial part on the CANIE Accord, we'll be having two parts on the panel. I would like to introduce you to my colleague here, Zach, that will be moderating the second part. Zach, do you want to just say hello?
Thanks, Sebastian. Yeah, my name is Zach Tobin. I'm the CANIE Accord representative for the Americas chapter. So looking forward to sharing more about how this all works, and we'll be here as a resource for you after the session. So looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah. So thank you, Zach. I will start with Kilian here, where with a few questions on their example, specifically on why basically they decided to start when they started working and considering climate action, how they find out about the CANIE Accord, and what was the deciding factors, you know, to become a signatory, and how do you see that being a signatory impacts your office, in this case, not your institution, in terms of your stakeholders. So after you, Kilian, and then we'll continue with you, Mark, and Alejandra.
Thanks, Sebastian, and thank you for having me as part of this panel. I'm excited to share our experience. So I'll just kind of walk you through how we came to the decision to sign the CANIE Accord. I joined LSU as a coordinator of international student engagement starting in 2021. And at my first NAFSA conference is when I first was introduced to CANIE and heard about the Accord. I had always been really interested in climate action. In my undergraduate degree, I studied environmental policy. So going into international education, I was always looking for ways to find that intersection and was really excited to hear about CANIE. So when I first heard about the CANIE Accord, I was really excited, but I was also a little bit overwhelmed because being a young professional, new to the field, new to my office, I wasn't sure. I mean, it's easy to feel like you don't have that decision-making power. You know, it's hard to bring up something like this to leadership when you don't have all of the details figured out. But with some encouragement from my supervisor, I wrote a memo to our department head outlining what the CANIE Accord was, why it was beneficial for our university to sign, and he was really receptive to it and agreed that we could sign on. So that was a big step for us, and I think being a university located in Louisiana, taking climate action is super important because we're one of the states that's already feeling the impacts of climate change. The coast is eroding at a rate of 30 football fields per day. So our communities are really feeling that here. It's not something that we can take climate action in 10 years. We have to do it now. So it was really important that even if we're not experts on climate action, on sustainability, just taking that first step of signing the Accord, and that really outlines some concrete actions that you can take, which was super helpful as a new professional, learning how to do this work as I go. Using the CANIE Accord as a framework has been super valuable. And in terms of how I hope that this will impact our institution and our stakeholders, my job is directly relating to the students. So I see my stakeholders as students. International students are coming from all over the world, so they're facing double exposure to climate change in their home countries and also here in Louisiana. So the more that we can do to create a safe and sustainable world for those students and to empower them to also take climate action through their own travels and studies, the better. And I hope that as a department signing on to this accord, we can help to accelerate climate action throughout LSU in general, and then also partner institutions throughout the US and the world, showing that it is possible, and that we can only grow our actions from here.
That's great, Kilian. Thank you very much for that. I know that Louisiana State University has a very good agriculture school and also one of the best programs in landscaping as well. From my personal view, one of the most urgent points on climate change is food safety. And my personal example, I live in a house, I have a plum tree. Last year here was so dry and so hot that last year I had a lot of plums. This year, zero. It's not someone telling me. It's my own tree in the very same location, in the very same country that last year was blooming, and this year I don't have plums. And I have all my neighbors and family saying, where are the plums this year? It's like, no, zero, nothing. And that's 100% climate change. And so that food safety with growing population and 100% of what we eat comes from either food, plants, or animals, and they're getting impacted as well, not just people. So I will move to you, Mark, here, because I know that also you have signed the CANIE Accord as one of the first signatories. And in your case, what was the motivations? How did you get to know about CANIE and impacting?
Good. Thanks, Sebastian. Unlike Kilian, I've been around forever, and in some ways that's a good thing, some ways that's a bad thing, particularly when you come to something like this, which is seen in some institutional circles as being, something we don't necessarily need to be doing, and yet coming from a kind of a foundational place from the institution and saying this is something we need to make some changes on. Often young voices are the ones bringing those forward, and so I think it's important for all of us to take responsibility with this. So just some context, the British Columbia was the first jurisdiction in Canada, or in North America actually, to implement a carbon tax, and which is still in place, and so there was early movement on the part of the province to kind of go after this as being a clear and present problem and emergency, as you mentioned, Sebastian. And so there has been a relatively high awareness among public institutions as well as to what our role is in doing this. And so I had been talking to Sarah Mines from Alethea Cooperative, and I think CJ was there as well. And sometimes these things come up through just personal connections because you're interested. You need to find somebody who you want to talk to about what it is, you can maybe do to get involved. And so I was introduced to CANIE that way. And a part of the process here was that the institution through the province was required to include the environment, climate, and sustainability as part of our institutional strategic plan. So that was done in 2021. But we had been active since about 2017 on a mandate from government to reduce our GHG emissions. So we reduced between 2017 and 2022 about 20.5% in our GHG emissions as an institution, because we're required to track those and we're required to report those to the ministry. We're also required to pay on a per ton basis for carbon offsets. And those carbon offsets are returned to us as far as project work at an institutional level. So in looking at that, I was kind of, realizing that as a department within the institution, we had different areas of focus that we should probably be looking at, that the institution was looking at big, broad activities, that there was already a climate and sustainability steering committee, that we had one of our members or one of our staff involved with that. But we thought it's important that we take some direct responsibility for the work that we're doing and the impacts that we're having as a department. So I think, like LSU, we signed the accord as a department, but I have the responsibility in my role that I can also sign on behalf of the institution, which is what I did. And through our 41 commitments, we basically have been working with those commitments to give us some direction as a department. What are we doing? Why are we doing it? And how are we doing it? And how are we using these as a sort of a guidelines for us to move forward? The part of the thing that I realized as I was going through it is that these aren't, I don't have to sign off on these and report on them to any particular body or group. There are responsibilities since we've signed onto it, and that provides some flexibility. You know, I can think 2 years out and think, okay, are we meeting these commitments? Do we need to meet more? Are we not meeting some? And so we need to review on a regular basis to be able to sort of see where we're sitting with all of this.
Thank you, Mark. Very important. You brought something that I totally forgot to mention when I was explaining about the accord. Within the 70 commitments, in order to sign the accord, you just need to the minimum number is 5, and most likely most institutions are already doing some of those 5s for sure. If you read the 70 commitments, they are divided on 3 ways: on better, best, and sorry, I forgot now. But basically, most of them you're already doing. At least 5 of them, I'm sure that most institutions are already doing that. Now, moving with Alejandra, it's interesting to listen from the case at Louisiana State University as Kilian writing a note and doing something bottom up rather than the other way around. So Alejandra, you told me that also at your institution was brought into that way, right? It started bottom up, and then how you came to connect with CANIE and started interacting with us.
It's actually like Mark, I've been here forever, since the 90s, but I think one of the things is that for the Costa Rican case was pretty much an organic evolution that led us into the CANIE Accord, actually, because Costa Rica has had a long tradition of being involved in conservation, establishing in the 90s the national park system, ecotourism as a model of development. So Costa Rica has always been involved in a lot of green initiatives. When the 2015 summit of the UN summit established the 2030 agenda and the sustainable development goals, it was pretty much just an excuse for us to align in terms of having our conservation initiatives and all of the research that we were doing at Universidad Veritas actually come into aligning with the sustainable development goals. Of course, we also had Cristiana Figueres, our own Cristiana Figueres, with a protagonistic role in the Paris Summit and promoting the signature of the Accord. So that was something that led us into, little by little, doing curricular alignment of our courses, our study abroad, and our regular degree-seeking curricula being aligned with the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. The government has also done the 2018 to 2050 decarbonization agenda. So a lot of that was already established in Costa Rica. For us, Universidad Veritas, listening to everything that was happening globally made our faculty be the ones who said we need to kind of surf the wave and jump into this opportunity and start working in terms of climate change and the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. But of course, I was the one in international education attending conferences like NASA and the Forum on Education Abroad and the different education abroad conferences where I finally heard about the CANIE network and the CANIE Accord. And that's what prompted me to come back to my faculty and tell them, well, actually, there's actually a network that talks about, to me, the main factor for deciding was sharing with them the 3 principles of CANIE, and that was, take immediate action. We were already taking some action. Collaborate, and that was very important for us to be able to collaborate with our partner institutions and NGOs and our local communities in Costa Rica, and actually see how we can develop, how can we contribute to climate solutions and advancing social justice and working in terms of what we did. Our main stakeholders, of course, are our students, just like Kilian said, and Mark as well. Our students are already coming to Costa Rica for study abroad, and even our degree-seeking Costa Rican students are competency-based. So for them, everything's project-based, and they're very engaged in hands-on evaluations. So everything that they do in projects tends to be geared towards sustainability, regenerative culture, circular economy in terms of product design and architecture, and the impact of climate change, because we do have to start working on adaptation when we have our Central American countries facing a lot of impact from climate change. So we think that our students were the first ones to really be telling us, let's do these types of projects, and our faculty helping them as well. But we knew that we had to be able to talk to other stakeholders, including the authorities and the board, and working with the other NGOs and rural communities that we work here in Costa Rica. And that's when we decided that it was important to go ahead and sign the CANIE Accord to make sure that we could all start integrating these forces, students, faculty, NGOs, Costa Rican government, and also our authorities here in place in Costa Rica.
Thank you, Alejandra. That's great information. As you say, the main stakeholders of the whole education sector are students. None of us would have a job if it weren't for students, and that's what we need to consider here, that this is a priority for them. And if it is a priority for them, it needs to be a priority for us as well. So now I'm going to leave you with Zach, that's going to lead the next part of this panel discussion. So off to you, Zach.
Yeah, thank you, Sebastian. And I want to kind of keep going with that topic of stakeholders and who the CANIE Accord, how it manifests itself on a day-to-day basis at your universities. Because one thing that I think we can control as international offices and universities is our own business practices. So I'm curious, maybe we can start with Kilian. Have you thought about when you were thinking about which pieces of the CANIE Accord to sign, were you thinking primarily about what can we control as an office to show off how we can be more sustainable, or were you thinking more externally, can we make an influence on our student population? Because that's another kind of level of challenge in changing student behaviors. How did you kind of balance those two dynamics of how can we change our behavior, but also think about student behavior as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when looking through the list of commitments, the easy place to start for us was the low-hanging fruit of what do we have direct control over? What can our office do without having to go through other offices, get approval, all of that. So that's where we started. But obviously we wanted to have a larger impact too. So from there, we went to partner offices across campus, meeting with, for example, the LSU Office of Sustainability, the LSU Facilities and Operations offices, parking and transportation, to try to see how we could broaden our impact beyond just what our office controls. And that so far they've been receptive, but I was hoping, because I don't have necessarily the background on how do you write a climate action plan, how do you measure emissions, things like this going into implementing this accord. I was hoping to find offices on campus that might already be doing that work, but ended up finding that most offices weren't doing that work. So even the sustainability office didn't have a climate action plan, wasn't measuring emissions, and sort of said, well, if you do it first, we'll use that as a model so that the university can move in that direction. So it's sort of a collaborative effort. We're potentially leading the way, but the rest of the university will hopefully come with, and they seem receptive to working with us. And then in terms of changing student behavior, that's definitely something that we want to work towards, both with our incoming international students and also our outgoing study abroad students. So I've talked with our Office of Study Abroad about developing some sort of orientation module that goes in the pre-departure orientations, talking about how basically starting with like the basics of what is the carbon footprint, how does your individual travel impact the climate, and how can your actions while abroad, how can that make a difference in the planet's sustainability? So we're working in that direction for sure, and that is part of our commitments to build up that sort of orientation both for our outgoing and incoming students.
Thanks, Kilian. The link I just put in the chat has this very specific list of CANIE Accord commitments you can make, and they are structured in different ways, so you can see kind of categories of topics. And Article 8, for example, has a lot about climate education, how we can make an impact on student behavior, but also the other ones that are much more business operations focused. Mark or Alejandra here, I think that idea of trying to make this something that you collaborate across departments and across the campus community. You both had, I'd say, local government and national government edicts, or kind of that continued support from local government. How was that a real key point in you trying to convince others that you should be engaging in this topic? Was that additional support really helpful, looking at kind of what the climate plans are within the Costa Rican government or British Columbia, for example? And how did you use those as leverage points to get other stakeholders on board?
Well, even if the national government in Costa Rica had a lot of these initiatives, our own government, institutional government, not necessarily was that keen into immediately adopting climate action, because there's financial pressures in order to create action. And you're going to find a lot of the authorities thinking, well, we must do it perfectly or not do it at all. And that is a bias in terms of how do we become engaged in climate action. Of course, we have the climate change deniers, so that's another element. And of course, it's not uniform, in terms of the authorities. We at LCI even had a lot of support from other LCI campuses, not just Costa Rica, thinking of design as, when they say human-centered design as an 18 sustainable development goal, they're not thinking human-centered, meaning the human being the most important stakeholder, but actually the human being the one who impacts many elements, impacts planet, impacts economy and political situation, impacts the well-being of future generations. So that's when they say the 18 sustainable development has to be also working into design and things like that. So we definitely had to really look into other stakeholders to help us pretty much convince our own authorities, institutional authorities. But we did have a mission, and that mission did state that we had an interdisciplinary and sustainability focus. So we pretty much grabbed into that and said, we have to be coherent. And in order to be coherent, we don't have to be perfect in terms of doing all this. We need to figure out what resources we're already using for our students and for faculty, and use those at the same time to veer them towards climate change. But you definitely have to learn to speak their language. And I'm talking about the board and the CFO. You need to learn how to get to them, analyze what their goals are, and then start preparing by presenting every single climate change action or any initiative as actually an achievement. And for them, sometimes it's much more important to see it as something that they can use as publicity, or, just kind of flaunt all of these achievements. And for us, it's a win-win. We need the resources. We need to be able to work with rural communities and actually help them too in their projects. But at the same time, the institutional authorities need to feel like they're also gaining in Veritas in their goals. So I think with faculty and staff, we were able to find the allocation of funds for all of them.
And it was mentioned earlier, trying to meet the students where they are, because we know students are becoming increasingly more interested in climate change. Does anybody on this panel, did anybody have a resource that they were able to tap into to try to make that case, to share that this is what students are wanting, and this is a market efficiency, and this is what will help students want to come here and be a part of what we're doing?
Absolutely. There's actually reports that state that Gen Zs are actually looking into the institutional background and how involved they are in sustainability, regenerative culture, and climate change action to choose what institution to go to. And there's surveys. You can find surveys in terms of this data.
If you have any of those bookmarked, Alejandra, I want to put them in the chat. I think folks would,
I will.
would appreciate it.
I definitely will.
Mark, you know, from your perspective as someone who is making the decision around this, what, you know, you kind of were able to decide, you know, to have this be signed off by your department, but university-wide, you can make that case as well. Do you see challenges in terms of having this be a university-wide commitment, and what are those challenges, and how do you maybe think about making that stepping stone? Do you think that it might be a good idea to start departmentally and then move to the university-wide, or would you recommend trying to start big, and then if you encounter resistance, move back to the departmental level? Yeah,
I think the way that it worked for us was a little bit different, because the institution was making the commitment to sustainability and climate impact. Where we saw an opportunity when the institution decided to co-create a strategic plan together with an indigenization plan. Those plans are parallel plans at the institution. They both have equal weight. And so what we looked at was, with those plans being elevated to the same level, that our avenue of work was to work to indigenize our internationalization process. And a part of that work is figuring out with our Indigenous Education Office, with Indigenous communities, with the Indigenous Education Council, what key points of impact is the work that we're doing having on those communities, and how can they influence the work that we're doing in the world. And so that became the primary discussion. And again, we always have to, as a public institution, look at what the province is doing. The province then, around that time, took on the UNDRIP, the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, as a law in British Columbia, as a part of legislation, and it's called the DRIPA Act. That again was another piece that we needed to look at as a building block to how indigenization is impacting both all the work that we do in every aspect, how we see the world, how we interact with the world, how we build partnerships, and how we impact the environment and climate. And so as an example, one way to support that was to build an environmental impact project funded from our travel budget that went directly to two projects implementing kelp farming in Indigenous communities and Indigenous projects, that's headed by our research center. So, taking $10,000 and investing it from our travel budget into environmental offset projects that are impacting and supporting Indigenous communities in our region. So those kinds of things are what we're looking at as being our primary drivers.
Mark, I want to transition into the actual process of deciding what you're going to sign off on in the CANIE Accords. I put the link earlier in the chat that takes you directly to the list, which, there's a lot of commitments you can make, and it can seem pretty overwhelming to, go all the way up to 70 different things you can do. And gosh, I don't know if we can commit to these, and that's a totally normal reaction. But the reality, like Sebastian said earlier, is that you don't have to commit to even half of them or even a third of them. We're asking for a small commitment. And I imagine for a lot of you, when you looked at this list at first, you're like, oh, we do some of these already, like Sebastian said too. Kilian, maybe you could share a little bit about kind of how you went about looking at that list of CANIE Accord commitments that you can make, and then ultimately how you went through the process of deciding what to commit. You said was it 38 or 41 that LSU committed to international programs? 38, which is a lot, you know, and not every organization has to commit to 38. I want to be very clear on that front. But for you, Kilian, how did you get to 38, and how was that process for you as a department? Did you as an individual go through one by one and say, I think we do these things, and then move it up the chain, or did you bring a group together? Like, what was that? What did that look like?
Yeah, so I think it started by looking at the list, and like you mentioned, there were probably like around 10 that we were already doing or already on the way to doing, so those were easy to start with. And then it was about when I initially presented the idea of signing the accord to our department head, I had a list of, we only need 5 commitments to sign on. Here's what we're already doing. So we could already sign on, but here's what I think is reasonable within the next 1 year, 5 years, 10 years. And this is what I would like us to reach for. It's kind of a funny story because he said, yes, let's sign on. I sent him the link to sign the accord, and he clicked every single one of the 70. I think that was an accident. So we had to go back through and revise down to what we could actually commit to, because obviously there's some on the list that were just not within our control on a departmental level, like divesting LSU from fossil fuels. We can't necessarily do that just as our department. Obviously those are amazing larger goals to work towards and to push the institution towards working towards, but you have to be realistic about your own decision-making power. And then also part of it was meeting with the various offices within our department to see what was feasible within their own operations. Because right now, I'm the only one in our department who has climate action as part of my job description. That was part of signing the accord. They agreed to add it to my job description, but as one person, I can only do so much. So it was about meeting with the heads of each different unit within our department to see what each unit was able to take on, what was within their capacity, and what they saw as areas for growth within the future. And then also it was really important to get student input to see what was important to the students. So we met with various student organizations on campus that work for advocacy for climate action, to see what they thought the priority should be and what they might be able to help push forward as well. So that's how we got to that 38 based on what seemed reasonable in our situation. I think you're muted, Zach.
Yeah, sorry, Dan. You mentioned prioritization. I think that's an important thing to consider too, because I know at my organization, I work at ISA Study Abroad, and we also signed the CANIE Accord, and we have that list of things. And I'm starting to see after this first year, you know, we identified everything we could do, but in terms of what our capacity to really make a concerted effort to make that impact change, I'm thinking, okay, here are the things we've actually focused on this first year. And so to some degree, I think it's always a good idea to think about, okay, what would our priorities be? If we signed on all 38, could we prioritize all 38? Or are we really going to prioritize, a third of these? Mark or Alejandra, has that come up in that first year or two of the accord here? And maybe can you share a little bit about, as you've looked at the commitments you've made, have you not reassessed, but kind of been like, look back and be like, okay, this was a good list, or maybe we could have done more or less? Mark, you unmuted yourself. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that was the case with us. When we first decided to do this, we really did it kind of internally with my team. I reviewed them all. I kind of identified the ones that I thought were reasonable. I sent it out to the team, asked them to determine what they thought was reasonable for us as a department to deliver. And then we what we haven't yet done is gone back and done a full review. And I think that's probably our next step. We've done our we've done our 1 year sort of dashboard of all of our activity, but what we need to go back and do is do a full review of each of those pieces that we've committed to, determine which ones we've achieved or which ones we are achieving, and then determine is there any adjustment that we need to make. So I think that's a really good point, Zach. I think it's important to revisit this on a regular basis. I think it has to be.
In our case, we're pretty new in terms of the signature. We didn't sign that long ago. It was pretty much this year that we signed. So we haven't been able to revisit when we saw the 70 commitments, we went through okay, there's the basic, the better, and the best. And we, of course, looked at the basic, the low-hanging fruit, like Kilian said, and say, what are we already doing that we can do? It's obvious that in terms of leadership and influencing, I was thinking about my colleagues, other departmental directors, architecture director, the product design director, the CFO, things like that, and think, how can we collaborate and not put any financial burden in other stakeholders? And another thing is that when you think of climate action, so many times we think of just like the hands-on factual thing, but education itself is a platform for climate action, and it's very subtle. We keep thinking of offsetting initiatives as something as just, you know, reducing flight time and things like that. But there's also the onsetting type projects that are so important, and we're still trying to figure out, how do we measure that onsetting? How do we measure the impact of working with rural communities who are doing oyster harvesting in an island in Costa Rica? And that has to be able to be measured. And we're all still too new to this, so we don't know how to measure that, but we are offsetting or onsetting in different ways. So in terms of leadership, you know, we were very nervous when we committed. We did 29 commitments, and we were very nervous. We don't have any of the best. We didn't commit to anything of the best yet. We hope to eventually be able to, but we were so afraid because just, you know, working with our partner sending institutions, remember, yeah, we do have degree-seeking students, but we're also the recipients. We're a host institution. So we don't have a lot of decision-making in terms of travel of our students. We do in terms of our staff and our faculty, but not of the students that we receive internationally. So that's not a lot we can do in terms of the travel portion of the CANIE Accord, but we can do leadership. We can influence other departments within our institution. We can do emission accounting, and that emission accounting has created so much, not controversy, but at least discussion between faculty and authority, saying there's got to be a way that this other action that we're doing has to be able to count, but we don't know how to count it. We don't know how to measure it. And none of us are experts in terms of, you know, doing the mathematical part is easy. The offsetting is easy, but none of these other subjectives. Climate education is going to be the main one. And we only have 5 actually commitments in climate education. And yet that is one of our cores. But definitely facilities, operations, and procurement, we are receiving students. So there's things there that we can also do to help in terms of how do we evaluate each one of these commitments.
Yeah, we have time probably for kind of one more point. I think you bring that up, Alejandra. I'm interested to hear from Kilian, Mark, or you again, Alejandra. Is there any specific, like in this time since you signed the accord, have you noticed? Here, let me see if I can. Have you noticed there being a specific action and commitment you've made that you think has made a big difference already in the work you're doing, that you can measure and say, you know, and kind of show as a success story in terms of signing the CANIE Accord and then doing this thing, that there's a before Accord and after Accord story that you can tell? Is there a specific commitment that you made that you might want to share that you think is a really emblematic of what you've been trying to achieve?
Yeah, I'll do just really quickly. If we just look at investment in COIL, collaborative online international learning projects, for example, or virtual learning projects, we've invested in 2 significant COIL innovation projects to develop frameworks for building Indigenous COIL opportunities. As a framework for faculty to be able to understand how to build a Indigenous focused COIL opportunity. Another one would be, we have been able to get significant amount of funding for an Indigenous virtual reality project that is being delivered on the west coast of the island. That we did that together with our Center for Applied Research and the Office of Indigenous Education, in order to be able to deliver a tourism-based virtual reality project in a small community on the west coast of Vancouver Island. So what those, you know, obviously what those do is they remove the need necessarily for travel by moving some of our might be exchange type of programs into a more of a virtual environment. So we've put a significant amount of investment into that.
I think in our case, it's been our relationship with our partner institutions, international partner institutions sending us students for study abroad, and of course, our relationship with rural communities here in Costa Rica and other NGOs, definitely with partner institutions, because I feel now that we've been able to convey our preoccupation. I mean, it's obvious that the trend is going towards short-term programs, and I think the statistics are like 60% of all U.S. students earning academic credit abroad are participating in short-term programs. But when you weigh the value of education abroad and the emissions that you're creating with short-term programs versus the impact that these groups could have if they had more time to really engage with rural communities and with some of the projects that we have, I think we have been able to get our partner institutions to understand why we feel that it's better to promote a little bit of longer, to make it worth those emissions, to make that the travel, make it worth it when you're going somewhere. They're going to be able to participate in a lot of initiatives that are actually knowledge creating. Like, it's not just about reforestation, it's about analog forestry. So understand that it's not just about agriculture, it's about permaculture and sustainable initiatives like that. So being able, that really has been happening now, because our faculty are so excited to be able to find ways to measure a lot of these projects and initiatives as carbon calculations, that they're really getting engaged in terms of every one of the projects that students do. They want to be able to measure it somehow and see where we can find ways to do the math and offset with that. And of course, our partner institutions are also getting involved as well.
So for our department, we only finalized our commitments last month. So we're still very much in the planning phase, writing our climate action plan, but a few things that we've really made progress on. To give some context of sort of where the office was at and where we're headed. When I started at LSU, the person that I was replacing had binders of every single email that she ever received printed out and filed by month. So everything was by paper. Every document request that a student submitted for a new I-20 or DS 2019, everything was done by paper. And now we're fully virtual. So we're moving in the right direction. And then we've also worked with the Department of Residential Life on campus, because we realized that there was, during move out every year, a huge amount of waste. People would move out of their dorms and throw TVs and mini fridges and couches into the dumpsters. They'd be overflowing. But then at the same time, we have a really big need within the international student community where they don't have the financial resources to furnish a new apartment when they first arrive. They just have 1 or 2 suitcases. So we were able to work with the residential life department to create a donation program where we had donation bins in all of the housing dorms. When people moved out, we collected those, and we have what we call the swap shop at our building in the International Cultural Center, where international students can come and take like household items for free whenever they need. So that was a way of locally reducing some waste that we were seeing, solving a problem with the international students. But we're definitely looking forward to implementing more of the very specific CANIE Accord commitments once we get our climate action plan fully published and ready to go.
Terrific, terrific.
That's so nice to hear. That's part of the circular economy into practice, Kilian. So great news. Zach, let me just start sharing again as we move. Can you see my screen there? No.
Yeah,
sorry.
Sebastian, we can see your screen. Yeah.
Perfect. So we wanted to move into a short Q&A, allowing you the possibility to ask anything. But before that, let me introduce to our vice president in the chapter, Rafaela. She's joining us from Brazil. Rafael, if you want to unmute yourself, and together with Zach, who's going to be the main person for the CANIE Accord. As I said, Zach is available for having short meetings with you in case you're considering to sign the CANIE Accord, or if you need any other information, you can email us at America. So now off to you, Rafaela and Zach, for the Q&A.
Yes. First of all, I would like to know how many of you feel encouraged and motivated to engage your institution in signing the CANIE Accord. Maybe you can react through Zoom and put your thumbs up. So I see some people writing in the chat. I'm going to ask my supervisor tomorrow. And yes, the second question would be, before I give you space for you to talk, is who can you involve in your campus within this next week, like to help you on this task? Who can you think of? I think it's very important for us to set a plan, right? Maybe make this note and give you a deadline to contact this person that is also concerned about climate change and can be an ally with you to bring that discussion to the campus. So make this note, post it on your laptop, on your computer. And what questions do you have for our panelists? Is there anything that comes to your mind that could help you on this? Meredith, do you want to ask something?
Yes, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Oh, thanks so much. I'm so sorry. I'm a little bit in the dark here. This might be to Mark or anybody else who was at CBIE. I learned about CANIE just earlier this week from one of the sessions, and I met CJ Tremblay. So that's how I've come to be here. But I just wanted to understand, because I know that CBIE is a new member, so I'm wondering if they have plans, or if that was talked about at the conference at all, in terms of rolling out some plan to help member institutions sort of get on board with this. Or Mark, maybe even in any of your discussions with other institutions, with some of your meetings. I just wanted to understand sort of their role, or maybe where they were coming from with being a client now of CANIE.
Yeah, thanks, Meredith. I didn't see anything from CBIE. I talked briefly to Larissa about it, but it was kind of in passing, and there wasn't any further discussion that I was involved in, at least, or didn't hear that discussion. I think she may have mentioned it in a study abroad presentation that she was doing yesterday. Because I do remember something, but it wasn't very prominent. That's a fact.
Okay, thank you.
There's a good question here, Rafael, in the chat, which is, what have been some hesitations from the offices in signing the accord? I want to be ready for any objections, before you even go into that conversation. Just curious to see if anybody has an example of any objections.
Well, I heard one. If there's none coming there. No? Okay. I heard one common objection that I think it's important to address, Zach, that it's about not seeing. Sometimes I heard some universities saying, oh, but our competitors are not there. Our competitors have not in the competing way, but like similar institutions to us are not signatories. And one of the main reasons for that, as I said in the beginning, is the fact of the CANIE Accord being relatively new. It's just like a month and a half old, and many institutions having very long processes for this. Some offices are like Mark or Kilian or Alejandra, which much faster processes, but some other universities, this can take quite a long time.
I'd also make the argument there, Sebastian, that you want to be the leader in these topics. And that was an argument I made to our president and CEO, who was fully on board and supportive, but going to our executive team, I said I wanted ISEF to be one of the very first organizations to be on this bandwagon to show our commitment. And I think that means something, right? You're not just joining after everybody else joins. And so I think that is something you can talk about, being a leader in international education, being someone who's actually at the forefront of these topics by signing the CANIE Accord now, gaining the kind of the reputation of being someone who's an early adopter of it, and being, you know, half a mile ahead of all your, if you really want to see them as competitors, being there.
That's exactly what happened to us, Zachary. We are the first Latin American university to sign the accord. And that was what we used as a pitch for a lot of the authorities, because they weren't against it. They saw the logic about it in terms of government, you know, approval for us to be there, us being under the government's the Costa Rica, essential Costa Rica brand, all of those things. It wasn't about that. It was, for them, it was more about what can be the financial impact, you know, what can be, because we're not a public university, so we don't get government money. Every single cent we make, we need to either reinvest or figure out what we're going to do. So management of resources has to be pitched in a way that you can show that you're already contributing to a lot of things, so that's not extra that you're going to have to be spending, and that the way that you're going to try and manage funds is going to make sense in a win-win way. It's not just about you know, the students' experience and being in accordance with the government's plan or anything. It's actually about the institutional or the organization. When it's not a university, it could be an organization. It's about the win-win, how they're going to actually benefit from being the first one, like Zachary was saying, being the leader in terms of being the first one to sign.
On the other end, you know, I see Todd mentioning the political concerns of public universities, and so there are different attitudes around climate change depending on, you know, where your institution is located. I can imagine that there are some areas where, you know, trying to be far out on the climate change topic can be, you know, seen as a negative thing, and you can be as public, or I mean, it'll be publicly on our website, but you can make this a real internal set of goals as opposed to really publicizing this at every turn. There's different ways to approach it in that way too.
Any other questions? Do you anticipate challenges knowing about your institutions? Anything you would like to comment, those who are with us? That they might support you. Todd?
So I mentioned in the chat that I'm the president of the board of Virginia International Educators, which is our state international education association. And because we have so many institutions that are public institutions where we don't even have signatory authority for our own offices to sign something like this, we are exploring the possibility of, if VIE joins, right, then that commits us as an organization, which individually commits a lot of the folks who are doing the work to the principles, even if we can't necessarily implement all of them or sign CANIE in our own offices. We are still, as a state, working toward a lot of the principles that are there.
We'd be thrilled about that, Todd. You know, reach out to me, and we'll reach out to Americas at CANIE, and I'm happy to talk about this more and figure out what the next step would be. And then each institution can kind of see those set of values and try to make their own changes, which is great.
One of the recommendations I can give, if you find challenges down the line with kind of your bosses, your administrators, your finance people, and so on, is like survey students. Ask students, as simple as that. All of your institutions have a student population, bigger, smaller, whatever. you have a database of students, just make a very brief survey and send it to them. Is climate action important to you? I can guarantee you that students are gonna say that, yes, this is relevant for them. So again, students are the ones that make our jobs possible, and that's what we need to listen to. And usually, eventually there is when the leadership will say, okay, yeah, if students want it, we can do it.
Anyone else?
I see here a question from Byron. Zach, you want to take that one?
Are you willing
Yeah,
to meet
yeah,
with
I agree.
university administrators?
Sorry, Raphael. Yeah,
No,
Byron,
go
I'm
ahead.
happy to chat about what our best strategy would be to support you and the arguments you're making on campus. And so for sure, let's have that conversation. And I think if we can find someone that's a good representative of either that as like an institution like yours or from CANIE itself, I'm happy to see how we could best support you in those meetings. You know, we're very public, or Alejandra's already offered the Costa Rican perspective as well, which is great.
And I think
Yeah.
there's such a variety in the signatory list that we can start finding institutions that have similarities, institutions that you think your authorities might think, well, this is an interesting case study. And then we're still a small group, and it's very easy to communicate with each other, very fast and easy communication within our membership. And so it's very easy to ask, you know, in my case, I have no problem explaining the difficulties, our fears, and how we feel that we're able to face our commitments, not perfectly. Nobody's saying we're going to be perfect, but how we can face our commitments and try to not have a financial impact, you know, whatever their questions might be. But you might find other either organization or institutions that you feel have either a similar quantity of students, they're public, they're big, they're small, and then, you know, within the membership, we can ask each other, hey, are you willing to explain your process and your decision-making process to my authorities, and we can help each other.
So yeah, Byron, reach out. We'll connect. Any last questions here before I perhaps hand it back off to Sebastian? Or Raphael, if you have any final thoughts as our new vice president.
I would like to invite the participants to share in the chat one word that stays with them from this call, like a checkout kind of. How are you leaving this call in one word or a short sentence? Motivating, prepared to act. Thank you, everyone. Informed, collaboration towards results. Heartening, enlightened, and inspired. Small steps count.
%.
Yeah, I think we are here to build this community of support. So feel free to reach out to share your challenges, and we can bring ideas, and we can connect you with other people who can inspire you and share about the challenges they face and how they move through it. So yes, excited to connect with colleagues to generate ideas and action. I really feel this is important. The importance of our gatherings is to find that you are not alone, that we are more people sharing with the same vision, and together we can do it. So let's create a better future.
Indeed. Thank you, Rafaela. Zach, anything for you to add?
No, I want Raphael's words to be the last ones. Those were great.
It's perfect words. Also reminding everybody that you are welcome to join our monthly meetings. Everyone here is welcome to join our monthly meetings where we treat different topics and we network and we play games sometimes and so on. So we are more than welcome to join our monthly meetings. Email us at americas@canie.org and we're going to be glad to inform you. And also you can check the CANIE website for more information. Before leaving, just thanking a lot to Mark, Alejandra, and Kilian for making the time and the energy to present here and to lead the sector into climate action, because definitely you there are leaders in what you're doing. Congratulations, Mark, for that award as well in CBIE last week, and that's where you see the results of your hard work, and I am sure that your hard work on climate action now, it's going to pay off in the future, most importantly by having a healthier planet for all of us. So thank you again for the time. Thank you to Zach and to Rafaela for helping into this session as well. Thank you for Ainsley for joining, and thank you all, every participant, for joining us and making the time to come and learn more. If you need anything from CANIE and want to learn more or get involved into climate action, just email us at americas@canie.org. And thank you again, everybody. Ainsley, not sure if you want to say some final words, but thank you, Alejandra, Mark, Kilian, for making the time.